If London goes the same way as other parts of the country, we'll soon find ourselves longing for the good old days when we could have 6 people in our house at once, or one guest at a time, as that's known in the Lee household. And I think if that happens, the glory days of it being considered sociable rather than socially unacceptable to see more than 6 people at once or different groups of people in quick successions, well, those days might start to fade further from our minds. And I don't know what we're going to do if we end up in that situation, if we find ourselves longing for those good old days in our social lives. But I do know what we're supposed to do if we find ourselves longing for the good old days in our spiritual lives. And I know because Psalm 126 tells me. So what is it we should do if we find ourselves in a spiritually dry patch? What should we do if that happens to us individually or us as a church family, or even as we look around the whole world? Well, there are 3 things from Psalm 126. First, we're to remember the past good times with thankfulness. Second, we're to pray for restoration with eagerness. And third, we're to prepare for the long haul with patience. The first thing Psalm 126 encourages us to do in a spiritually dry time is to remember those past good times with thankfulness. And it does that in verses 1 to 3. And as it does, in verse 1, it tells us that when you're in a good place spiritually, it feels like you're in a dream. And of course, you know what dreams are like. In our dreams, amazing things happen. The incredible is possible. Until you wake up knowing that it was too good to be true. But when things are going well spiritually, perhaps when you are particularly aware of how God is at work in your life, as the Israelites were in this psalm, well, that dream is a reality. And as you look back, you remember spontaneous singing and laughing with joy. First half of verse 2. As you look back, you remember other people, even non-Christians, noticing how good God had been to you. Second half of verse 2. And when you remember such times, you look back with thankfulness, verse 3. Even if in the present things are really, really hard. That's the first thing we should do. The second thing we should do if we find ourselves in a spiritually dry time is to pray for restoration with eagerness. That's the thrust of verse 4. And the Negev, the area we read about there, it's a desert in Israel. And much of the time there's no waters in the stream in the Negev. And of course that makes life really, really hard. But sometimes rain falls in the mountains around the deserts of Israel, and the streams spectacularly flood with water. I put a link to a short video of that happening in the description below. Have a look later. It is amazing. And Psalm 126 tells us to pray for that sort of restoration, to eagerly ask God to refresh us spiritually in a quick and dramatic fashion. He can do it. He does do it. He has done it. And he may well do it for you if you ask him. But sometimes he may not, because sometimes he has good reasons to work slowly in our lives. And so the third thing Psalm 126 tells us to do is to prepare for the long haul with patience. That's why we get the agricultural imagery in verses 5 and 6, because, well, farming is slow work, isn't it? And there can be setbacks along the way. There can even be tears. But if the farmer is patient, if he keeps sowing, keeps tending, keeps working, well, then he will reap a harvest. There will be songs of joy, even if they come through tears and toil. And the same is true in the Christian life. We will have songs of joy, even if they come through suffering and hardship. even indeed if they come in the next life rather than this one. And so Psalm 126 says, keep going like the farmer. When you're in a spiritually dry patch, prepare for the long haul with patience, knowing that one day you will return with songs of joy. There we go. Psalm 126 encourages us in a spiritually dry time to remember the good times with thankfulness, to pray for restoration with eagerness, and to prepare for the long haul with patience. Why not take a few moments now just to ponder and reflect on which of those you find it hardest to do, and then take some time to pray about it. And who knows, the Lord may restore your fortunes like streams in the Negev.